Hi, all you cave dwellers, and welcome to the Cavern Podcast. The Cavern Club, the most famous club in the world. From the Beatles and the Stones to the Arctic Monkeys and Adele. Join us on our podcast for Cavern Conversations. Each episode we talk to a special guest with real Cavern connections. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. I'm your host, Jon Keats, and you are listening to Series 1, Episode 5. Hope you're enjoying the series so far, and if you are listening for the first time, make sure you have a listen to the previous episodes. Now, I caught up with today's guest in our studio here on Matthew Street when he was here to do his show with the LA-based band The Tearaways. However, it is his work with another band from the US you will know him from. He is a founding member of one of the pioneers of the New York new wave punk scene of the mid-70s. He is, without a doubt, one of the most well-respected drummers in the business and an absolute gent. Welcome to the Cavern Podcast. From Blondie, Clem Burke. Hi, Clem. Welcome back to Liverpool. How's things?
Hello, John. I'm well today. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood here in Liverpool.
It's quite
happy to be here.
It's quite a chilly day, isn't it?
Not too bad. I mean, I was out for a jog along the Mersey this morning. It was fine, and I love seeing that Peter Blake ferry. Peter Blake painted one of the ferry. It's amazing to see that. It's incredible. It's so cool.
Yeah, there was talk of that going at some point because we got it for Capital of Culture. I think it was part of this.
Oh, I see.
And then it was going to go, but it's
into a museum.
I don't know.
It'd be hard to put a ferry inside a museum.
Well,
You'd have to go to the Smithsonian or
I'm sure
DC.
they'd try. They'd probably try.
Oh, it's amazing to see that. It's so colorful, and the pop art graphics on it, it's a beautiful thing to see. The Mersey, it's interesting, because you could make that analogy to the Hudson River in New York with New Jersey on the other side. It's kind of where I grew up with the river in between. It's very similar to Liverpool and Wirral, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, which is what John Lennon said when he moved to New York.
Well, right, yeah.
There was the similarity. Have you ever seen? I don't know if you would have done this. Have you ever seen Liverpool from the other side, when you go over the river to the Wirral?
I actually don't think I ever have. It's something I need to do.
The views, you can get the ferry. If you get the ferry, the famous ferry across the Mersey,
of course.
That will take you there. But the best views of Liverpool, our skyline, is from over the water.
Well, sure.
As you can imagine. It's
well, there's in New Jersey, in West New York, New Jersey, it's up on the cliffs. It's on the Palisades, as it were, they call it. And that's an amazing view of all of Manhattan across the Hudson River. Yeah. There's a lot of similarities between the whole New York area and Liverpool itself. I think
there's similarities in an attitude as well. I remember first time I went to New York, I wouldn't say, I felt like, I wouldn't say I belonged there, but I felt relaxed there, coming from Liverpool. There was a definite attitude.
Right. Well, just in general, when we first began Blondie, New York and London had a real connection, and of course that led to us touring the rest of the UK, and seeing Liverpool for the first time was really amazing back in the 70s. It's changed a bit now. I think people are more aware of the musical history of the city, which seemed at that time was somewhat negated in a way.
I've got to ask you the question now. I'm asking a question, and I know the answer.
Okay.
And it's probably a similar, if not the same answer as a lot of our American guests that come onto this show.
I think I know what you're going to ask me.
But we've got to ask the question because you can't underestimate the impact. And so I ask you, what was the moment that got you realised you wanted to be in a band, you were into music? What was the point?
Well, for people of my generation, from Bruce Springsteen to basically you name it, seeing the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show was a life-changing experience. The next day at school, everyone was chatting about the Beatles. Prior to that, I really liked the Four Seasons from New Jersey, who are kind of like the New Jersey Beatles in a lot of ways. We used to have sort of rows in the schoolyard, and they used to have the Four Seasons versus the Beatles. They would have, like over here, they probably had Rolling Stones versus the Beatles. But in the stick, because the Four Seasons had, obviously, Jersey Boys. The legacy of the Four Seasons is pretty amazing, too. But seeing the Beatles, I think Steve Van Zandt has been quoted as saying, they seemed otherworldly. But, I've come to realize now, from your point of view, from a Liverpudlian's point of view, or from an English person's point of view, they were like the boys next door. And the vernacular that they used, the terms and the songs were just common language. But for us in America, it was like, what's the, in the queue, or, no reply, and all these different kinds of things. It was just a different way of speaking, obviously. And but it seemed very exotic at the same time. And, they were so polished. And I guess, Epstein made sure that they had a hit record before they came. And met with Sid Bernstein a long time ago as a potential manager for Blondie, as a matter of fact. It was an interesting man to talk to. He brought the Beatles to America, to Shea Stadium and all that. And then the great thing about the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, they brought American music back to Americans,
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're involved in a project which I'll come on to later on, because it's relevant to something I want to bring up later. But we work closely with Memphis as a city. Liverpool and Memphis. Two major, and Nashville as well. We've done some stuff, but Liverpool and Memphis, we've had a relationship for 20 years, and we're working on a project which is a huge artwork installation done by Shannon. You know Shannon, the artist.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And this huge artwork, which is like a 30-foot installation as you come into Matthew Street, and it depicts that whole influence of that music coming out of America, from Memphis, that was being brought over by the sailors,
Right, the Northern Soul came about. Yeah.
All of that music, and then how, several years later, it became, Mersey Beat and the Beatles, and we sold it back in '64.
Right, exactly.
So that is, again, not to be underestimated. That stuff that the Beatles were playing in the Cavern, a lot of those covers, that is exactly what all the bands were doing there.
Right. They all had a similar set list, I think, in the beginning of Some Other Guy, or I think Twist and Shout was probably special to the Beatles, though. No, do you think so?
Yeah, I don't know too many versions of it. I think the difference with the Beatles, I think because of Paul's musical upbringing, which was a lot of.
Well, his dad was a musician.
It was in a big band, and I think a lot of the stuff that the Beatles were doing, and certainly in those early days, the other bands weren't doing. They were a bit quirky. They were songs from musicals.
Taste of Honey.
Till there was, there was all sorts of stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's probably attributed to Paul and his upbringing, yeah.
I would say so. So early bands in New Jersey. When did you start playing in bands?
I started playing in bands probably about, adolescent, around 13. Traditionally set up in my mom and dad's front room with the drums, and everyone would come to my mom and dad's house because, the drums were set up there, and we'd rehearse in the front room. And, the first band I had was a band called Total Environment, and we had a light show and things. And this is like 1968, maybe. And we did the hits of the day, the top 40, as it's called in the States. And that band actually went on to enter more or less a battle of the bands. There was a DJ in America called Cousin Bruce Morrow, and they had a thing on Cousin Brucey's Big Break, where you recorded a track. You recorded a cover song and you sent it in, and then if they liked it, they put you in the studio to actually record the song for real. And which is the first time I was in a recording studio. I was about 14 years old, and then that's the song that they play on the radio and the public votes. And so our band came in the top 10. And normally then there's like a real battle of the bands at a venue. Normally it'd be like a ballroom, like a Hilton ballroom or something. But for some reason that year, as unbelievable as it may sound, it was at Carnegie Hall.
Right, okay.
So I played at Carnegie Hall when I was 14 years old with my high school band. That band I had my first 2 years of high school.
That's ridiculous, really,
We didn't win, but I just, obviously it was very memorable. I'm like, at Carnegie Hall, my parents were there. It was unreal. It was all downhill from there, Carnegie Hall, where am I going to go? Okay, I played Wembley. Okay, I played Royal Albert Hall, but Carnegie Hall when I'm 14, come on.
That's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's kind of funny.
Was there always drums? Were you always going to be a drummer?
Well, I attempted saxophone. I attempted guitar. I'm left-handed. That's another similarity between myself and Ringo. We play a right-handed kit, but we're left-handed. Thankfully, I think when I picked up a guitar, I picked it up left-handed. So when I was a kid, it was hard for people to kind of show me the way. You think of Wilco Johnson attributes his style to being left-handed, but he played guitar, Wilco Johnson from Dr. Field.
Yeah, with a very, very distinctive style.
Yeah, he was unable, as in that great documentary, Oil City Confidential, that Julian Temple did. He explains he wasn't able to hold a pick in his hand, which is how he came up with that strumming with his fingers and his particular style, because and I relate to that. It was hard to hold the pick and play the guitar right-handed. I mean, I could play a few chords nowadays, but at the time, it was more natural for me to take to the drums.
Yeah, and being a left-hander like Ringo, I mean, because there's a lot of. I mean, I didn't know until I actually do a little bit of research, by the way.
Okay.
Not too much, but I didn't know until yesterday, the day before, that you were left-handed.
Right.
Is that? I mean, that's similarity, because there's a lot of talk about Ringo and the way that's why there's certain fills. It's a different way. Is that
exactly? You begin a fill with your left hand naturally if you're playing the drums right-handed and you're lefty. A right-handed drummer would begin a fill with his right hand and come around the drums in a different way. It's a little eccentric, some of the fills, some of Ringo's fills. And the beginning of Call Me, for instance, with Blondie, a lot of people try to replicate that, but they don't realize I'm starting just naturally with my left hand. So if they start with the right hand, it kind of not exactly the same, the way the notes land. But it makes it a bit unique.
Yeah, absolutely. So cover bands. I mean, with what I'd like to do, we're chatting away. You're in Liverpool, which is great, and I know Liverpool's. You've been to Liverpool many times,
right? But I love it here. Yeah, it's great.
But to go back, co-founder of Blondie, 74, 75?
74, late 74.
How did it come about? Were you gravitating towards the New York scene anyway as a musician?
Well, a lot of my mates from school, for instance, were kind of caught up into just staying in the bedroom and just practicing all the time and not really getting out and doing it. And the artists that they liked were not particularly the ones that I liked. I mean, for instance, David Bowie changed my life. I really didn't know anybody that liked David Bowie in my hometown, for instance. And 1973, Ziggy Stardust at Carnegie Hall, funny enough. And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, 5 years ago, I was on that stage.
You're doing my gig.
It's amazing. No, it wasn't really like that, but it was just that I already had known what it was like to be at Carnegie Hall, to be backstage, which is kind of amazing when you think about a little kid being backstage at Carnegie Hall. And, it turned out, at that show, Andy Warhol was there and things like that. But also my soon-to-become partners in Blondie, Debbie Harry and Chris Stein, they were both there. Joey Ramone was there. This all came kind of a conversation later, obviously. But that was a life-changing experience. David Bowie. To answer your question, I had a band called Sweet Revenge, and we used to play at a club called Club 82, which was 82 East 4th Street. And ironically, just around the corner from CBGB. But that was kind of during the kind of sort of glam rock scene, which was not particularly popular in the States, except for in New York, for instance, and maybe in LA.
I didn't think glam was big in America, so it was like almost like a cult thing, was it?
It was very, and of course then that kind of moved on to the whole CBGB scene being a kind of a cult thing for the first 2 years. But the New York Dolls would play there at Club 82. I had a band called Sweet Revenge. We would play there, and Debbie, Harry, and Chris Stein had a band called the Stilettos. And it was like a girl group trio with Chris and two other members, one of whom was Fred Smith, who would go on to be in Blondie right when I joined, but soon thereafter left to join the band Television. So we would all hang around there, and Joey Ramone was in a band called Sniper, and he was kind of known as Jeff Starship at the time. And people like Richard Hell, who went on to play, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, they had a band called the Neon Boys, and they would play there. And then there was a band called Another Pretty Face, and then there's all the glam rock bands of the era. Well, Harlots of 42nd Street was one of the bands. So anyway, I would hang out there, and that's where I first met the other members of Blondie, old Debbie and Chris, and I was aware of what they were doing. And then one thing led to another, and I actually answered an advert in the Village Voice that I had kind of had a knowledge that it was their ad, and that's how I went and officially met up with them.
How long was it before you knew that it was, you were onto something?
Well, I mean, I continuously say this. As a drummer, first off, I have to have other musicians to work with. I'm not going to be a solo drummer. Drummer can make a solo record. Earl Palmer's made solo record. Hal Blaine's made solo. Ringo obviously was singing great. But at the time, I needed to find my David Bowie, my Jim Morrison, my Mick Jagger. So that was I wanted to be in a band with someone who had that charisma, that creativity, that stage presence. And it just so happened that I met Debbie, and she was the one.
Absolutely.
I knew that. But there was no like bags of money on the table or anything like that. I mean, it was a struggle for the first couple of years, for sure. I mean, we came from the streets. We're a traditional band, how we just formed on the streets of New York and just kind of slogged it out for a while.
Well, that goes back to, I suppose, what you said about, a few years earlier when other musicians back in New Jersey are in the bedrooms. You've got to get out there, haven't you?
Right. Well, also they were also more interested in being in cover bands and making some money playing. Because, back then, every bar had a bar band. I mean, that's the whole tradition of Springsteen and the E Street Band. That's where they come out of. They were a bar band. I mean, I was in bar bands, but
so there's plenty
got paid.
Yeah, plenty of work there. But
yeah, at that time, every bar, every pub had bands. Back in the day, of course, that's been usurped by DJs and, just whatever. But so that's really where most of my peers were interested in making a few dollars and playing these cover songs and trying to be like Jimmy Page or Eric Clapton, which is great. But one of the things we had a common bond when I first met up with Debbie and Chris was our tastes in music. We loved the Ronettes, we loved Iggy and the Stooges, we loved the Velvet Underground, we loved the Kinks, the Who, that stuff like that. So that was kind of unfashionable at the time. It was not really it's been said over and over again, prog rock and this and that, but that's all fine too. I liked Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I like things like that. Yes, but primarily it was a basic return to the roots of rock and roll, really, which is what that whole kind of scene evolved out of.
Your first UK tour was supporting television in '76. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you've come from this whole New York scene, which presumably it's like any scene, isn't it? We're in Liverpool. We think what we're doing is great. The New York scene at that time. There's so much. You're painting the picture of it. So much stuff going on. What was it like coming to London and seeing that? What was the right in the thick of this out and out punk scene? Was it very different?
Well, it was really the beginnings of the punk scene, and we did have an affinity with what was going on in the UK. The first gig that we did prior to the tour was a gig at a university in was it Bournemouth maybe, and we played with the Squeeze was the opening band, because actually the promoter of the tour was a guy called Miles Copeland.
Oh, right, okay.
Who went on to obviously, manage the Police and start IRS Records, but he was a concert promoter, and he's the one that put that tour together for us. And the audience at the first gig were very animated, and they were jumping all about and all that, because in New York it was more like more bohemian, like sort of almost beatnik. If you can imagine sitting in CBGB at a table with a little candle burning and having a cocktail or having a beer, and then the Ramones are on stage, doing their thing, but people would be sitting like you're at a cabaret or something, initially. So that was kind of how the New York scene was at the time. So we're coming here, that was the punters were much more animated. And yeah, it was kind of interesting to be on tour with our friends, colleagues from CBGB. Television undoubtedly, in my mind, was the greatest band to ever come out of CBGB. I think the Ramones were the most influential. The Ramones are to me, they're after the Beatles, they're probably the second most influential rock and roll band ever. When you think of their legacy and all that. Unfortunately, the original members, none of them are around. It's a shame. But Yeah, that tour was. I think we visited Liverpool, but we didn't play.
Okay.
I think we played in Manchester. I think a few of us took the train here to just see it. I'm not sure. I got to look through the archives. I don't think we played in Liverpool. I know we were. I think we had a few days off in Manchester, and we did a day trip to Liverpool. But yeah, that was our inaugural tour of the UK.
I was going to ask you about the Liverpool connection. Blondie did play Eric's.
We did.
Yeah, so it wasn't on that tour. I was thinking, was it part of that tour?
It wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been that part of that tour.
Okay, so
Not that I can imagine. I should know this, but I'm actually working on a memoir, and it's really helpful to have the archives. But I don't think on that tour. I think the only gig we did in our own right, other than supporting television, was the very first one.
Okay.
With Squeeze. But I think we did play Eric's a little later on.
Yeah. I mean, you're always down as playing Eric's, but when Eric's opened and there was this the punk explosion, and there was not a lot of love for the Beatles. Certainly in Liverpool in that period, it was too close to there was no hindsight.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying when I came here in the 70s. Yeah. The relevance of the Beatles didn't really seem to really be in the forefront of the history and the culture of Liverpool at the time. And then, of course, the Clash had that. No Elvis, no Beatles, no Rolling Stones in 1977 and all that.
Well, it was a whole rebel against, this is, which understandably, this is our music. But the irony is, on those Eric signs, on the bottom it says Cavern Enterprises. So all along there was still that link.
Right.
But there's the famous picture of the Ramones. I don't know if you've seen that. And obviously they were big Beatle fans. And,
of course.
There's a few photos, and one of them, where the original Cavern was, the warehouses above had been knocked down. So they played Eric's, and they took a picture of them with all their signs and everything straight out of the van. The van's in the picture on a lot of them. So they turned up at Eric's, and they got their photo on the original site of the Cavern.
Oh wow!
Great photos. Yeah. So it's that whole link, isn't it? I was just wondering, as a Beatle fan, you come to Liverpool, but in at that time the Beatles weren't celebrated. It took. Really, John Lennon's death in 1980. That was, as horrible as that was the catalyst that started bringing a lot more Beatle fans to Liverpool to pay tribute to John.
Oh, wow.
And that was
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, it really was. And at the time, there was no Cavern there because the Cavern hadn't been demolished because it's a basement. It had been filled in and the warehouses had gone. So people were arriving in Matthew Street and there was no Cavern. And that's where the idea of let's try and reopen the Cavern, it was as a tribute to John, really, and to the legacy. And that's when the city started. It took a long time because, it's the 80s was a dark time in Liverpool. So the difference, you're here in Liverpool, 76, that sort of period. Presumably over the years you've been here.
77 is the first time I've seen.
Okay, 77.
Yeah. That's when that tour was, in early 77, the television Blondie tour.
I mean, you come to Liverpool now, and you come here quite often. You must see a massive change in Liverpool.
Well, tourism, I would imagine, is a big part of the economy of Liverpool now.
It is. I mean, they did a survey actually in the 80s. So this is the 80s when, there were a few pioneers who saw that, okay, we should be celebrating the Beatles. And there was a survey done by I think it was the council or the similar body. And the two main reasons in the 80s people were coming to Liverpool were Liverpool Football Club and the Beatles. And that was in the early days. That is now absolutely still the case. But the difference, I think, now is when people come here and return, they see what else we've got. The buildings, the architecture.
Oh, the architecture is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
So I think
the restaurants are great as well here.
You went for an Indian last night. Are you a big Indian food fan?
Oh yeah, actually, where I live, most of the time in Los Angeles, there's a great Indian right near me and a pub right across the road as well. Yeah,
that's pretty much that's when you nail on life. If you've got a good Indian and a good pub, that's all you need. We don't ask for much. Anyway, I want to talk about our Beatle Festival, International Beatle Week, and the first time you came there, I think it was 2016.
I think so. I've been here 2 or 3 times at the Sheraways for the Beatle Fest, at least twice. The last time I did it with them, we played in the Casbah.
Yeah.
We played in the basement. It was amazing to be there.
In 82, was it 82 when Blondie split?
Yeah, we stopped in '82. Yeah,
which was ironically, it's like an eight
at the peak of our success.
Yeah. And an 8-year period, which is exactly the same, really, as the Beatles recorded.
Actually, I've thought of that.
Yeah,
to tell you the truth. Yeah, that we were only together that amount of time and made 6 or 7 albums during that period, and over 8 years.
And we're absolutely huge. But,
yeah,
an obvious question, or is it when that split, when you did split? How did you feel?
Oh, I was shattered. I was very, very disappointed about it all. I mean, we had, I think, something ridiculous like 5 nights booked at Wembley Arena. And we had to cancel, and also a tour of Japan. We did the American tour in the summer, and I had gone, Nigel Harrison and I, our bass player at the time, had gone to a club in New York called Haraz to see a band coming over from the UK who happened to be Duran Duran. And so at the time, we went backstage and we spoke to them and we invited them to come on tour. So they were our opening band on that tour as well. So there was some real strange feeling of the ending of Blondie, as in watching the rise of Duran Duran, a lot of it attributed to the beginnings of MTV. And so I just determined to carry on. And I already had a relationship with Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox from Eurythmics. I had done an album with them when I was living in London. I did an album called In the Garden with them in 1980. And we did it in Neunkirchen, Germany, at producer Connie Plank's studio. And it was interesting with Connie because he produced Kraftwerk, which was a big influence on Blondie, particularly on Heart of Glass.
Yeah.
So when I first met Connie, he acknowledged the influence and thanked me, actually, for bringing that electronic music style that we incorporated into Heart of Glass. He kind of saw that with the influence, and he kind of was proud of that. So that was a great beginning for my relationship with Connie Plank. And then, that album didn't really particularly sell. We did a tour. The first time we were on, I think, maybe Whistle Test. First time that Eurythmics were on TV, I was the drummer. And then, they had to reassess their whole situation, and they just famously went away and bought a drum machine and a synthesizer and made the Sweet Dreams album, which I was invited to go on that tour, which I did in that period between 80 and 82. And that was like out of a film, because we're touring around in a van. And by the end of the tour, the Sweet Dreams was a massive hit. And but I was, really shattered when the whole Blondie thing ended, and at that time,
because you've got it all mapped out, haven't you? It's you're saying you got like the next year booked out.
Yeah,
you know what's coming up.
And everything was going according to plan. As far as I was concerned, I was like, this is perfect. I was still in my mid-20s, when it all ended. So I was like, wow, because at that time, I was a success at an early age. Yeah. I was kind of washed up by 25 in a way. But I went along. I started a band called Checkered Past. We did one album for EMI, and Steve Jones from the Pistols was in that band with me. And I just carried on, but I was devastated, shattered. But also, a big thing of the ending of that era of Blondie is attributed to Chris Stein being ill, which he was quite ill. And I wasn't really quite sure what he had, but he was very, very sick. And it was the time of the when AIDS was really kicking in. So we didn't know, because a lot of our friends were passing away from AIDS and things like that. So it was a dark, dark time. I just carried on, one thing led to another. And I can't believe here I am, we're still doing it. And we just did Glastonbury this summer. And then on Debbie's birthday, July 1st, we did a massive gig with Iggy Pop, Stiff Little Fingers, and the Buzzcocks in Crystal Palace, 25,000 people. We had a brilliant show, amazing reviews. Yeah, I mean, the comeback, so to speak. Yeah.
Do you call it? When?
Well, it was. Yeah.
I mean, it felt like you'd never been away.
We had a good track to come back with, the Maria song.
Well, that was just like, it was like classic Blondie.
Right, exactly.
The sound and everything.
Yeah, because interestingly enough, I've always thought about this. In the States, we've had 4 number ones, which is pretty unbelievable in itself. But each of those have been a different song. And none of them were really the songs that made us in the UK, like Picture This or Denis or Hanging on the Telephone. They weren't hits in the States. The four number ones we had was beginning with Heart of Glass, then Call Me, then Tide is High, and then Rapture. All basically different from one another in quite a lot of different ways. So...
But that's the thing about Blondie. I think the whole eclectic...
Yeah.
There's a lot in the pot, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a new album coming next year that's finished, and it's as eclectic as ever. The last one we did, Pollinator, was a very different record for us. I think we had a lot more objectivity because 90% of the songs were from outside writers like Johnny Marr, or Sia, or Nick Valenci from The Strokes, and we had a different objectivity on that album. But this one is coming. Most of the songs are coming from the band. There's another song from Johnny Marr. And also now, my longtime mate, Glenn Matlock, is playing bass with us.
Glenn, you said it. The Pistols. You've been working with Glenn for years, haven't you?
Yeah, we had a couple of different bands. We had the International Swingers, and just this past March, we did a chap from that I know from the ICA in London, a guy called Tom Wilcox, put together this idea to play the music of Iggy Pop to celebrate the anniversary of the Lust for Life album. So. Initially, it was supposed to be a chap called Tony Sales, who played on the first two, on those two, Lust for Life and the Idiot albums. And actually, our first national tour with the Blondie in the States was opening for Iggy Pop, along with David Bowie on keyboards. I mean, that was insane.
What does that takes you right back to?
Oh, that was amazing. That was like unbelievable.
Was it up there with Carnegie, or was it bigger?
It was. That was the ultimate. We played 2 nights headlining at a club called Max's Kansas City in New York City, and then we got into a caravan. To this day, I have no idea who was driving. And we drove overnight to Montreal, and we got into the dressing room, and we were all kind of crashed out at this theater and just lying about, having a cup of tea or a beer or whatever. And then the door opens, and David and Iggy walk in to introduce themselves, and they were perfect gentlemen. And it really set a criteria for us of how to treat opening bands. And then David would, he was paying attention to us, and he was fascinated. Our keyboard player at the time, Jimmy Destry, had just gotten a Synclavia, the Synclavia was like one of the first advanced synthesizers, and so David was fascinated by that, and then watching the sound. My favorite thing is to watch sound. I've been to some brilliant sound checks, but watching David sound check the band with Iggy every day was like fascinating because they were always trying to fine tune what they were doing, different arrangements, different vocals, And then I've been to like Springsteen sound checks and Bob Dylan sound checks. Like people like to play. They're not like just going to check in the sound. They're they're playing.
Paul McCartney basically does a gig in his sound check.
Right, exactly. Yeah, a lot of people like to do that. I mean, it was at a Dylan one. He played for like an hour, like playing all these old traditional songs and things like that. It's fascinating.
Well, it just shows
you warm up.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I played with the Ramones, we would do the whole set, like kind of acoustically before they went out and played. It's kind of funny.
2006, the Blondie were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Was that validation? Was that important? Did you need validation? Or
I never expected really to be inducted for some reason or other. And actually, that evening in my memoir, I have a chapter about it, and it's basically called The Hall of Shame because we had a very acrimonious ceremony on stage. And it was heartbreaking for me because I'm mates with everybody that were in Blondie. And, I brought 2 of my mates in, Gary Valentine, original bass player I went to school with, and Frank Infante, the guitarist who plays an amazing solo on Rapture, sort of blending that hard rock with R&B before Michael Jackson and all of that, Beat It and all that, And, they're my friends, but, life goes on. And at the end of the day, you just, you got to look out for yourself as well. But it was kind of very acrimonious. But it did validate. I'm proud that I'm in the Rock Hall. And the people at the Rock Hall, I interact with them. They're pretty cool.
Well, you are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and quite rightly. And, of course, let's not forget the Cavern Wall of Fame as well. Clem, I wanted to talk to you about your drumming project, the Clem Burke drumming project. I'm really interested in that.
Well, it began well over 15 years ago. There's a chap called Dr. Marcus Smith at Chichester University who was Olympic UK Olympic boxing coach. And so his idea was to make the analogy between sport and drumming, or boxing and drumming. When you think about a fighter in the ring exerting all this tremendous energy and his heart rate probably beating 160 beats per minute, or as crazy as that may sound. And then when the round ends, you sit down, so then your heart rate's going to drop. So you have to be in good physical shape in order to endure your heart rate on a kind of a seesaw, But so you can make that comparison with drumming. Say you're doing a really fast song, you're doing a 2-hour show. It's even more intense in some ways because a fight doesn't go on for that long. And so, the heart rate of the drummer is going to be rising as he's playing a fast song, and then when the song stops, the heart rate's going to drop. So that's kind of the initial point he was trying to make. And I was experimented upon for quite a few years. He would be wiring me up at Blondie shows, and he would be able to take my heart rate and then oxygen levels, and then he would take a blood sample at the end. And it's all very academic, and it just went on and on and on, where he was able to form a thesis. And we started the Clem Burke Drumming Project Foundation, and we do a lot of work with kids, autistic kids. I just met with Northrop Robbins recently. We're hoping to do something with them. And it's just an ongoing thing. I'm kind of the namesake of it now, but it's a positive spin on being a musician. And it has gone from the physicality of drumming into also the mental aspects of drumming. And that's where we can help people with autism just by showing them simple drum rudiments, something for them they can focus on. And I think we were chatting before about how playing a musical instrument is an amazing thing for an autistic child, and they can have this acumen for music at the same time as... Well, I work with this other charity called Wild Honey in the U.S. Once a year, they do... They choose an artist to do a concert. I mean, they've had, actually Mickey Dolenz, we were speaking of, was participating in one for a band called The Love and Spoonful. They've done ones for the Kinks. I would participate in one, the Kinks one, a Who one. But the main person that's involved in the charity, his son is autistic and actually doesn't even speak, but his son has written a symphony. He's that astute with music, at the same time not with language, but he communicates through music. So there's a tie in there with the Clem Burke Drumming Project that way, but and mental health is an important part of the whole thing.
It's the power of music, isn't it? We started a project. We were approached by a Liverpool-based charity called Tough, which is the unifying of faiths, and it's a worldwide charity, but it's got its roots in Liverpool. And we did Liverpool International Song Contest, which at the heart of it was a song contest. And people would write their song in, and it was launched on John Lennon's birthday, October the 9th, 2021. Mm-hmm. And the themes were, the Beatles themes: love, peace, understanding.
Yeah, positivity.
Absolutely. So at the heart of this contest was, people would apply, and if you applied, regardless if you got into the top 10, because they in the first year, the top 10, this is from all over the world, people were submitting, and they all came to the Cavern for the final. But whoever applied, and there was quite a few thousand the first year, they were all eligible for if they wanted it, 3 sessions with a life coach, with a psychologist.
Some therapy.
Yes, some therapy. But the project has gone bigger and bigger. It then, the following year, went to Nashville. Again, that's that link I was saying about Liverpool and Nashville as music cities. And the contest got even bigger. And it's now this year, it's the road to Memphis.
Oh, Memphis.
And
Memphis is a great city,
It's a great city. And we were there, Paul and I, one of my co-directors, a year ago. So because I was saying with Liverpool and Memphis, we do a lot of stuff together. And it's gone even bigger. And the numbers of people they are helping through this charity is remarkable.
Well, there's a real awareness now of the aspects of mental illness and mental health awareness, and it's kind of swept under the carpet for quite some time. It needs to really come to the forefront, and I think it is more and more. And there's a Music Cares in the States. There's a big help with that as well.
So you're in Liverpool, which is great. Lovely to see you again with the Tearaways from Santa Barbara. Who
Correct.
you've been playing with for about 6-7 years on and off?
Yeah, on and off. I mean, during the pandemic, in the middle of it, we were able to get into a studio in LA, Village Recorders, a quite renowned studio. People like Tom Petty, Fleetwood Mac, Steely Dan have recorded there. And the gentleman that runs it was able to give us a really good deal because it was lockdown, and they really went out of their way to make it healthy, to make it safe.
Yeah.
And my friend, longtime friend, Ed Stasium, a producer who produced, the Ramones and Talking Heads and Living Colour, and that he came on board as a producer. So we made this record, and it's called For Our Next Trick, and it's out on Dirty Water Records here in the UK. So opportunity arose for everyone had the time to come over and do a few shows to basically promote the record. And the set that we're doing tonight is primarily songs from the new album. And it's been going down really well. The Tearaways have been influenced by the Beatles and influenced by the music of the 60s and influenced by surf music and also punk rock. And it's kind of assimilated into the sound of the Tearaways. And then, of course, during Beatle Week, we did some Beatle covers as well. And they're the brilliant singers, the guys in the band. And so that really lends itself to doing. Well, tonight we're doing a Hollies song, as a matter of fact. Which is not that easy to do with the harmonies and that.
Do you know that when the Beatles left the Cavern in August '63, that they'd fulfill their contract because famously the last gig they did in August '63, the power went off through the gig.
Oh, no.
The place was heaving, and the then owner Ray McFall had held Brian Epstein to the contract. There was one last gig on the series of gigs that had been booked, and at this point, the Beatles they should not have been playing the Cavern, but he held them to it. There's about 500 people crammed in what is now the front room, and another 500 outside. The power goes off halfway through, to which Lennon has famously said, "I told you we shouldn't have come back to this."
Yeah, right.
But it was actually the Hollies who took over. In effect, from the Beatles.
Yeah, and I mean the Hollies. Their name is derived from Buddy Holly, I believe, similar to, I think the Beatles got an homage to the Crickets.
The Crickets, yeah. They did.
Also, I think that I often wonder about the Beatles with the whole beatnik thing, with the whole beat movement, with Allen Ginsberg and things like that. If that had something to do with the beat title, as well.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
Well, of course, people they were reading that stuff, obviously. Kerouac on the Road and things like that.
Yeah.
But the Hollies, they're from Manchester originally,
from Manchester,
right?
Yeah. But they did pretty much became is what was going on then. I mean, after the Beatles, all the record companies were just descending on Liverpool, who can we get? And they were the next. Even though they're from Manchester, they were pretty much the house band in effect, and they got signed from the Cavern.
Oh, I didn't really realize that, but that's amazing.
Which is full circle. So look forward to the gig tonight.
Yeah.
Blondie's got a new album.
Coming next year. My memoir's coming next year. Yeah, for sure.
You'll be back at the Cavern, I think, with Lust for Life.
I don't think it's at the Cavern.
Oh, is it not? No, okay.
Well, I'm going to be back.
I'll have a word with Mr. Tom Wilcox then.
It's not. I think it's at the O2 or something.
Okay.
I think.
Well, that's good. That's
a little bigger. That tour, the Lust for Life tour, was just a one-off. Kevin Armstrong, the art guitarist, worked with Iggy for about 10 years, and he was the MD, the musical director for David Bowie at Live Aid. And he's on the Blah, Blah, Blah album. And then Glenn toured and played with Iggy and recorded an album called Soldier and has a couple of songs that he wrote on that album. And then I did an album with Iggy called Zombie Birdhouse. Very kind of abstract album, but I also toured with Iggy and he was promoting an album called Party, and I guess he lost the drummer or whatever. I tend to be the replacement drummer, like the antithesis of Spinal Tap. I seem to come in and play with these bands. But with Iggy on that tour, we opened 2 nights for the Stones in Pontiac, Michigan. Like about 50, 60,000 people indoors with opening for the Stones. It was Iggy, Santana, and the Stones, and we had absolutely no sound check, and it was a bit chaotic, the shows, to say the least, but very memorable.
Yeah. Wow.
So anyway, we have people that have worked with Iggy, and then our singer is the woman, Katie Puttrick.
Yeah, who we know from the the series back in the 80s and 90s.
Right, and then she was on BBC Six as well, and she does various things. I met her. I was doing a kind of a preview of my memoir at ICA a while back, and she was the compere for that. So we got on pretty well. And it's an interesting spin on Iggy Pop's music, like with a woman fronting it and singing it. That lyrics become they're kind of pretty poetic in a lot of ways. A lot of his songs, and it's just a different spin on it. And it seemed to have worked. People were kind of really happy about it, and impressed with it. So Tom, as you mentioned, decided we could do it again.
Yeah,
so
well,
we all had the time. And prior to that, I'm actually doing a half dozen gigs with my mate Glenn, promoting his album called Consequences Coming. That we did one gig in at the Roxy on Sunset Strip, in between some Blondie gigs. And actually, we were talking about my mate Fred Armisen, who's going to be at the Cavern.
Yeah,
the musician comedian from the States. And Fred was kind of the compere for that show, and also we did a couple of songs with him, and so
you like to be busy, don't you?
I like to play music, and I said as a drummer, you need to find other musicians to do it with,
I suppose that's when you're in a band like Blondie, when the vehicle is out, it's out, and there's a tour and there's a plan. Yeah,
there's a step. Blondie's a stepping stone for all of us. I mean, Debbie's been able to turn her career into, she's been in a lot of films, she's has solo records and things like that, and Chris has his photography, and we carry on, but that's the foundation, and luckily we've had enough success where we're not motivated by, when I do these things, I'm not motivated by anything other than I want to play music. Yeah. So it's easy to do.
That's what it all comes down to.
Sure. Well, that's what it was. That's how it started back when you just wanted to play music. So just carry that on, and I get a benefit from it, because a drummer, he's kind of, you got to have your chops together. You can't just really sit around and say, oh, I'm a drummer. And then that's what the Clem Burke drumming project kind of portrays, the physicality of drumming. It's not that easy. There's more to it than having a beer and walking on stage, let's say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've said that before.
Well, we'll take that. We'll take that one. I'll remember that one.
Yeah.
I sent you a message this morning. I put you on the spot because I forgot to ask you. We every guest that we're coming on the series 1 of the Cavern Podcast, I've got to choose their top 3 favorite Liverpool songs by Liverpool artists.
Right, you took me by surprise. They're off the top of my head, but I think they're all good ones.
Well, I was impressed. It was back within the hour, so thanks for that. Don't Bother Me by the Beatles.
Sure, I think it was one of George's first songs. I kind of like the kind of negative aspect of it. It's not like, Please Please Me or She Loves You. It's like, don't fucking bother me.
Yeah, get out me face.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I mean, it's about I guess a breakup, but I'm George. I got to have dinner with George along the way, and spent an hour in a dressing room with he and Bob Dylan at one time. It was pretty amazing. No, I met Paul several times. I think for our second trip to England, I met Paul, and I was just got to have a little brief chat with him when we did Glastonbury. We were on the side of the stage as whatever that sounds like, but during Elton. It was like McCartney, Sir Paul and his family, and Slash and Dave Grohl. I managed to make my way up there, so
as you
had
did.
A few words with Sir Paul there, and I did as a designer, John Varvatos in the States, and for one season, Ringo was kind of like the face of that season, Autumn line, and there's a video out there. Ringo's kit was set up at a house in the Hollywood Hills, not his house, and various drummers walked in and out of the frame. People like Chad Smith from the Chili Peppers, Trey Cool from Green Day. Actually, Steven Tyler was there. A few people, and everyone did a little riff on the drums, and that was the kind of the promo for that John Varvatos clothing line. So that was really fun to do that. But yeah.
So you met three of the Beatles.
Three, yeah. And then there's the famously, you probably already know this, Ringo's book, the postcards from the boys or from the lads, whatever it's called. there's a postcard in there where John is saying how much he likes Blondie, and
I didn't know
Ringo
that.
should.
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
it's pretty amazing. He's saying
Well,
he actually says about Heart of Glass is something like telling Ringo he really likes that, and it's something that he should think about doing something along the lines of that.
Isn't that wonderful?
And yeah, and Sean has been quoted saying that his dad liked Blondie. Actually, tragically, I think Debbie and Chris were planning on making their way to the Dakota to drop off the album we did at the time, Auto American.
Right.
Was going to drop it off at the guard stand.
Well, John and Yoko, I mean, they were, I mean, certainly Yoko, I mean, all that's Yoko's music, that was very influenced by that New York scene.
Yeah, I mean, the B-52 is also,
yeah.
and actually, I know probably winding this up, but my band, when I had in high school, actually, it was the second band I had was a band called Sweet Willie, for various reasons. And we did a gig at a girls' school. And after the gig, myself and a few of the band members, we got into a car and we drove through the night to Syracuse University to go to the opening of the exhibit that they did when Imagine and Fly came out.
Yeah.
And John was there, Yoko, and we went to the exhibit. But it was like a Beatlemania thing, and we just drove through the night when we were there for the opening. That's when I was a kid, 17 or something.
Yeah, a Beatles is it?
But I never met John. But
no,
I'll see him in heaven, maybe.
But we inducted you into the Cavern Wall of Fame.
Oh, right, with Julia.
And that was with Julia, John's sister.
Yeah,
so.
that was amazing. We had a good chat about those days when she was, what 8 years old, maybe, during the
there's
height.
8 years between her and John, there was.
And she was telling me about the City Hall, when she was at City Hall, and it's like something out of the Hard Day's Night. They're trying to get a sandwich, and they can't even get the sandwich and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, she's...
amazing. I mean, Hard Day's Night set up a sort of a romantic idea of what it's like to be in a band. Everybody was mates and all that, which is true to a certain degree. But there's also the other side of it.
It's true until the business side kicks in.
Well, there's the other side of it, and unfortunately sometimes. But actually, there's the End of the Century. The Ramones documentary kind of portrays the other side of what that's like.
Yeah, the B side.
Yeah.
Second choice, which is a Liverpool band.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about that.
Yeah, but we're on the music. A band which I hugely influential on a lot of the American bands, the Searchers,
right?
Which could have been your first choice. One of our other guests has already nabbed that one. Your old friend Earl Slick.
Earl, yeah. Well, I had a band with Earl for a moment as well. Yeah,
I was fascinated because I've got to know Earl again through the Beatle connections. We managed to put last year for the Beatle Week. We managed to put John Lennon's last studio band from Double Fantasy Sessions together. We had Tony Levin
and
Andy. Andy was there.
Andy's great. I met Andy a long time ago. Andy Newmark, fantastic drummer.
We've done a lot with Earl. He was fundamental in helping us getting the guys back.
Great.
We put a show on at the Philharmonic Hall.
Oh wow, that was probably great.
It was a bit special.
Who was on bass on that?
Tony Levin.
Oh, Tony Levin. Oh wow.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I didn't think we'd get Tony. We've got a recording of it. I'll send you a little sneaky little.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind hearing a bit of that.
It was a great show. But he went for Searchers when you walk in the room. So you've gone for Needles and Pins, which is...
Right, written by Sonny Bono, I believe.
Yeah.
But, they were saying about the Searchers having such an influence on American bands. It's very, very true. The whole kind of folk rock sound, and of course Tom Petty, the Byrds, and all. It all kind of comes from the Searchers with 12-string. I mean, of course, with the Beatles using 12-string as well. But
it was very jangly with the Searchers.
Yeah, very much the sort of... Mr. Tambourine Man, things like that. The Byrds in particular, folk rock. Searchers, and they were huge in America, the Searchers, huge. Lots of hits.
Your third choice, now on drums on this track, is our mutual friend...
Chris Sharrock. Right. Who I was just with the end of the summer. I went and saw a couple of Knoll gigs. They're in Korea right now, I think.
I think so, yeah. I think they might, yeah.
Chris is amazing. Great drummer and... really cool lad, great guy. We're actually pretty good friends nowadays.
I know that. I think one of the last times, whenever you're here, Chris is in town. He's here.
Yeah, we hang out a bit.
But you've gone for There She Goes by the Laws, which is an absolute classic, isn't it?
Oh, it's amazing, and it really kind of holds through to the legacy of the sound of Merseyside prior. It has. It echoes the sound of like the Searchers and the Beatles and things like that. The harmonies, the use of the guitar. And I actually got to see the Laws in Los Angeles a long time ago. They did one tour of the States, or they played in LA for sure. I mean, it was great. It wasn't very many people there, type of thing. But yeah, that song's a classic.
It's a classic. I mean, it's sort of, they should have gone on to be huge, but you know, it's well documented. There's lots of issues and lots of frustrations. And
yeah, that's what I'm saying. The other side of what it's like being in a band. Another Liverpool band, actually, that I've actually just recently worked with is Echo and the Bunnymen.
Okay, well,
I'm on their whenever it's going to be released, their new tracks. I'm the drummer.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and that was really great to work with them.
That'll be out in 24.
Who knows? I mean, it's up to them. But they're telling me it's full. It's a full on go. Because I mean, you know, when you do a session, you don't really know how it's going to turn out. You know, I was hired to do some sessions with them.
Well, that's in a way that takes us full circle, because I mean they were part of that whole Eric's.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, that scene. I actually saw Echo and the Bunnymen for I was a little bit young for Eric's, but I used to go to the matinees. I saw Echo and the Bunnymen at that time for 50 pence.
Oh, sure.
On a Saturday afternoon matinee. I saw everyone there for like 50 pence.
I know, it's amazing when you think about that.
I know the bands that went through there. Hope the gig goes great tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. You know, it's just like to have a good time. The band's really good, and you know, the roots of the music of Liverpool are definitely in the DNA of the Tearaways. So
great band.
Yeah, it's just it's going to be fun.
Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time. It's good.
And we'll catch you up soon. See you next time you're in.
All right, mate.
Thanks.
Everybody stay safe out there.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cavern Podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. Remember, we can't do this without you, the audience. So please like, share, and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from. Also, get involved on our socials and tell us your Cavern stories. See you next time on the Cavern Podcast.